Hi everyone, today I wanted to share with you my most recent reads. I know the last video I uploaded was a recent reads, but I just had a bunch of books I read in a row and wanted to split it up a little bit. Hopefully the wind isn't gonna be too loud. It is like crazy wind out there. So if you hear like the sound in the background, that's probably the wind. But this is the only time that I have where there's nobody in my house. We have a ton of people coming or currently here for Thanksgiving. It just happened to be some people were going shopping and I'm just here with the kids alone while they're resting. So this is the only time. All right, so I have 5 books to talk about. And I'm gonna do this one like I did the last one where I just do them in order of the way I read them, because some of these ratings also I'm a little iffy about, so I'm not like wanting to put them in order of the way I like them or anything, because I don't really know. And the first thing that I have listened to recently was Well Met by Jen DeLuca. If you regularly watch my channel, you will know that this is a reread. I read this physically a month ago and I really enjoyed it. And I was at like a weekend retreat a couple weeks ago and I just wanted something that I didn't have to concentrate super on and just something light and fluffy. So I ended up listening to the audiobook of this. It was still 5 stars for me. I think with romance books, they can be so subjective because everybody has like a different love interest they're attracted to or different tropes that they enjoy. And so I know some of my friends haven't loved this as much, but for some reason I just really love this book. If you didn't hear me talk about it before, I'll just really briefly tell you. It is about a girl who is helping to take care of her sister while she's recovering from an injury, and so she's in town helping with her niece. Her niece wants to join this Renaissance fair for the summer, and so she has to volunteer as well. And while there, she meets this guy that's running the Renaissance fair, and they kind of hate each other at first, and then it develops into like a hate to love, basically, the situation. But I like the way it was done in this one. I don't always like a hate to love, but I like the way it kind of developed through their acting. So they were like, pretending to be characters at the Renaissance fair, and their characters started to like each other, and then they started to like each other in real life. And I just thought it was fun. There were some Shakespeare references. It was a good time. Not gonna talk anymore about it since I reviewed it before, but still really loved it this time. And then next, I finished A Stolen Life by Jaycee Dugard. This is for nonfiction November, and I think I did this for the prompt of truth because this is her memoir and her telling the truth about what happened to her. For those of you that don't know, Jaycee Dugard was kidnapped when she was 11 years old, and this is the story of her kidnapping and time in captivity. She was held by her kidnapper for 18 years. While in captivity, she had 2 daughters. And so like, that's a lot of life. I mean, she was there till she was 29. A lot of life that she lived in like this guy's backyard in these buildings that he had set up for her and the kids. So this book is one of those that I did not give a rating to this book. I don't think I could rate it because there was a lot of feelings involved. I would say in terms of Jaycee and her courage to tell her story, I would give it a 5 stars because it takes a lot to be able to say these things that happened to her. I mean, horrible things happened to her, and to be able to bring those to light. But at the same time, I did not enjoy reading this book. Obviously, reading all those things is really hard. I'm somebody that in fiction, if I know there's a trigger warning for sexual assault of a child, I generally won't read that book. And so obviously this book is real and has sexual assault of a child. And so it was really hard for me to read, so I didn't enjoy it. But the reason I kept going and finished this book was because in her introduction, she talks about why she wrote this book and how her kidnappers don't want the story out there. Obviously they did horrible things. They don't want people to know what they've done. They want to keep it under wraps. And so she is taking control of her life that she wasn't able to control for 18 years and putting the story out there and letting everybody know every detail of what these people did. And also she's giving herself a voice and showing that she's not ashamed, because she as the victim doesn't have anything to be ashamed of. The people that did this to her should be ashamed. And so reading that introduction, it really helped me push through the book, because I agree that so many people that are victims of sexual assault don't tell their stories because they feel some kind of internal shame involved with their, what happened to them. And, they shouldn't be the ones that feel ashamed. And so I really did want to read her story so that I could be one more person that has heard about her story. So yeah, if you can handle the subject matter, I think it is worthwhile to read it, just knowing, what's out there in the world and giving her a voice. But it is very difficult. She doesn't shy away. She tells you exactly what happened to her, and that was hard. It also, if you read ratings on this, a lot of people comment about the way it was written. She doesn't use a ghostwriter. She writes everything herself, and obviously she only had a 5th grade education. So it is not flowery writing. It's not nice writing. It sometimes switches back and forth in tense. It's kind of confusing in places, but I think that actually was good, because I think that if this had been this well-written book that was written by a ghostwriter, that I wouldn't have connected with Jaycee and really felt for her as much. But knowing this is her telling her story bit by bit, the complete truth in her own words, I think that made it actually a worthwhile read doing it that way. So I'm glad that they chose to go with her writing it herself. And then next I listened to an audiobook. I wanted something kind of light and fluffy, something that I wouldn't have to be really invested in, because I just needed something that was just pure fluff. And so I picked up a historical romance. This is the first time I've ever read a historical romance. I got the recommendation from my friend Jenn from the Book Refuge, and the book I listened to was The Duchess Deal by Tessa. And she's, I guess, really popular in historical romance. This is the beginning of a series. I think there's only 3 books out right now in the series, and this is the first one. And I'm kind of trying to figure out how to rate this, because it did what I wanted it to do. It was entertaining, where I didn't have to fully be paying attention, could just kind of have it on in the background, and was fun. But I wouldn't say that I loved the story or all the aspects about it. Obviously, this is my first time reading historical romance, so I can't judge the whole genre based on this book. I want to try maybe a couple more and then decide if maybe it's not the genre for me. But at this point, I'm going to give it a 3-star. So this is about a duke who, at the beginning, we're hearing kind of from both perspectives in the story. And the duke, at the very beginning, wants to find a wife because he wants an heir to pass on his, whatever, the property and all that stuff he owns onto. But he's had a really horrible injury through war, which has burnt half of his body. He was engaged before going to war, but his fiance left him when he came back and had all these scars. She didn't want to be, married to him anymore. And so he just needs to find a woman to marry him, and he wants to make a deal with her. Instead of actually having a love marriage, he just wants to find somebody that he can say, I will, give you all the access to money and wealth and things. I'll even give you a house in the country that can be all yours, as long as you will sleep with me until we have an heir. And then once we have an heir, we don't have to ever see each other again, basically, is the deal he wants to make. So then enters our protagonist. Cannot remember her name, and of course I don't have the book, but anyway, she is a seamstress, and so since she doesn't have a lot of money and things like that, she thinks this is a great deal and that she'll get to live in a nice house in the country by herself. And she has kind of been jilted in love before, so she doesn't really care about the fact that she won't necessarily get to have a love in her life or whatever like that. So she takes the deal and decides to marry him. And the thing that I did enjoy about this book, I think I had kind of the best chance of liking this book specifically, because it felt very much like Beauty and the Beast, because the Duke really felt like he was a beast. And there's actually a whole side plot where he is roaming the streets at night with a cape on and kind of is the beast. And so he very much is the beast character, and then this woman is very much the beauty character, where she's trying to show him that he has more to him than just what's on the outside and all that. And kind of their way their relationship grows feels very much like Beauty and the Beast. So if you like Beauty and the Beast and you don't know if you like historical romance, this could be a good place to start. I think I enjoyed it as much as I did because it felt like a Beauty and the Beast retelling in a way. So I liked that aspect of their relationship, how like he was really insecure about himself and like he didn't think any woman could ever love him because of like how his fiance treated him and all that stuff. And just the way that they developed in a relationship, I really enjoyed that part of it. But the things I didn't like are, well, there's basically one main thing I didn't like. Well, two, I guess. I'm not a really big fan of love interests that have that like kind of like all or nothing kind of mentality, kind of very high testosterone kind of thing of like, this is the way it's done and you do it my way type of thing. I'm just not attracted to that kind of style. The fact that he did have a real insecurity to him was the only thing that made me like not put the book down, because if he had just been like the normal arrogant kind of rich guy that, you know, kind of slowly like becomes more sensitive, I don't think I would have found that interesting. So I had to have that kind of like side part of him being a little more insecure, because I didn't really enjoy that part of his personality, the whole testosterone fueled part. And I know that's probably pretty common to this genre. I'm just making an assumption here, maybe that's wrong, but I didn't like that part. And I also didn't like the way the sex scenes were done towards the beginning. Obviously this is like romance, like there are like, I don't know, 10 to 12 sex scenes in this book probably. I don't know, I didn't count them, but there's a lot, like more than you would have in like maybe a contemporary romance. And I, you know, it's fine, you know, I expected that to be there, but I didn't like how at the beginning it felt like there was this issue of, oh, now I can't think of the word, of it being consensual. Gosh, why couldn't I think of that word? It was consensual because we were hearing from both perspectives. We know that she wanted to have sex, like that she was like into it and all that. But he, because he has all these insecurities, didn't think she liked it. And so like, he just was like, well, we gotta do it because we gotta have an heir. And so there was this whole like feeling of almost it being non-consensual, because from his point of view it was. And so even though that just felt uncomfortable for me, that even though we know it's consensual, to have one character think that he's forcing himself upon someone and being okay with that and just continue to go with it, that felt really uncomfortable for me. And that's how it was at the beginning, because until they kind of like develop more of a rapport, like the first few sex scenes, it felt very much like, oh, this is not consensual. And so that part made me really uncomfortable. And then after that kind of stopped and it became like fully consensual sex, then it just got boring, because the author used like the same words for like parts of the body and positions and all that over and over again. And it kind of felt like you could copy and paste the sex scenes. And then actually by the end of the book, I was like skimming, like I know I was listening to the audiobook, but I was like thinking of my shopping list or whatever while the sex scenes were happening, because I'm like, been there, done that. They're doing the exact same thing that they did 50 pages ago. So I don't know. I'm not very familiar with the genre, so I don't know if that's like normal or if it just is that maybe she's written so many books that she's run out of things to say about sex. But I just didn't find it that interesting if you're going to say the same thing over and over again and describe it in the same way. So that was a lot of talking about one book. But it's a new genre to me, so I'm just trying to figure out if it's worth me to try another one. I did think she was a humorous author. If you like historical romance and want to recommend one that you think will have consensual sex the whole way, that's a big one for me, and that would still have like interesting parts to the characters to make them less of cookie cutter things, cookie cutter characters, let me know and I will try it again. I don't want to give up on the genre completely after one book. And then next I read Starflight by Melissa Landers. I actually did listen to most of this because I was in the car, and so I went back and forth a little bit, but it was a quick read. I would say, what did I rate this? I gave this a 3.5. So it was not one of my new favorites. I'm not going to continue on the series because the second book in the series, I believe, is just like a companion from different people's point of view. But I was like entertained by this. It was fine. It's kind of like a sci-fi light book where it actually really reminded me of Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which I didn't really love that book, but the difference was that this one had a continuous arc in the story, and that's why I think I might have liked this one better, which a lot of people will probably think that's sacrilege because people love that book, but it was just too episodic for me. At least this had a flow, and I guess I never said what it's about. So this is about our two main characters. So Lara is poor and an orphan, and she's trying to get to the outer limits, like from Earth to the outer limits of the galaxy, because there's a job waiting for her, but she has no money. So she agrees to be kind of basically the, like, I don't know if they call it a slave or an indentured servant or whatever, to this really rich boy, and things happen along the way, and they end up like on this ship with a bunch of other kind of fun characters, and that's why it reminded me of Long Way to Small Angry Planet, because we get to know everybody on the ship and they all have their specific personalities, and I really liked the characters. I thought they interacted well together, and it was like a fun romp, like through different crazy scenarios, meeting space pirates and having to like flee from different entities out there that are out to get them. So it was fun, but I don't think it'll stick with me. I'll never read this again. It was just a one-time fun thing. 3.5 stars. And then before I talk about the last book, I would just have a little like disclaimer. I don't usually curse on my channel, but you will see because of the title of this book that I will be using curse words, just so you know, just because it's not something I normally do. So I wanted to warn people that normally watch this channel if you don't like to hear bad words. And then the other thing is, this was a book originally given to me as a NetGalley arc, and I was really behind. It was given to me in like June, and I just now read it. So I ended up getting the book from the library physically and reading it physically instead of as an arc. It turns out that I really am horrible at e-arcs, so I'm probably gonna like quit NetGalley for a while and not request anything else, because I still have like 4 books that I've had since summer that I haven't read. So obviously I'm not good at doing e-arcs. The problem is that like a physical book, you see it sitting there on the counter, and so like you're like, oh, I need to pick that up. But when it's an e-arc, it's just like out in the cloud, and so I don't like think about picking it up. And so the book I wanted to talk about is How to Stop Losing Your Shit with Your Kids by Carla Naumburg. And this is a like nonfiction how-to book. I guess you can count it as nonfiction November, since I finally read it in this month. And all this is her just telling you some tips and tricks on how to stop like yelling at your kids, or being passive aggressive, or losing your cool, or however you want to categorize losing your shit. And I gave this book, I would say, a 3 stars. I thought there were some helpful tidbits in this, but for the most part, I thought this was pretty common sense and could have been wrapped up in a couple blog posts. Like, this isn't a long book or anything. It's like 200 pages, so it's not long, but actually there's a part in the back. There's like 9 pages in the back where she just like basically summarizes everything that she's done. And I'm like, you could have just made a blog post out of that summary, and I probably would have gotten just as much out of it. And I hate saying that because I know she probably put a lot of work into this, but when you are a parent and you're trying to like come up with like a helpful technique to help you win whatever your parenting issue is, even reading a 200-page book, if you can get something that's way shorter and more succinct and to the point, I want to read that. I want to just like get the blog post or get the like article written for a journal or something like that and get it quickly, because I want to be able to implement that stuff. And this had just a lot of filler, and she was trying to be funny and personable, and so it wasn't like hard to read, but it's still like, I just wanted the information. And so I wouldn't say that this was like super helpful. It did have like, I'm not regretting the fact that I read this, because I think there were just like a couple things I got from this that were helpful, and that was one of the ones was she was kind of talking about some of the triggers in your life that as a parent that make you get angry at your kids and might make you lose your shit. And so, you know, some of them are pretty obvious, like lack of sleep, hunger, stress from work, stuff like that. But one she mentioned I didn't even think of, and is one that I actually suffer from, so I'm kind of glad she pointed it out to me, and that was chronic pain. I don't know if I've told you guys, but I have chronic tailbone pain. I either fell down or did something to bruise my tailbone 2 years ago, and it hurts every time I sit down. Like for the last 2 years, they haven't been able to fix it. I already went to surgery once, it's probably something I'm gonna live with forever, that every time I sit on especially a hard surface, I'm in pain. Even on a soft surface, if I'm there for more than like 20 minutes, I'm probably going to be in pain. And so I have to live with that every day. And I just put 2 and 2 together when reading this, that the time when I started like yelling more at my kids and losing my shit more was in direct alignment when my chronic pain started, which totally makes sense, because when you're in pain like constantly, it can like wear down your, you know, frustration level. Like you get frustrated quicker, you get angry more quicker because you're in pain. And so I'm glad she pointed that out to me, because now I can make more of an effort to compartmentalize that and like realize that, you know, my kids don't have anything to do with my pain, and try to like separate that and do some of the techniques to kind of separate the way I treat my children from dealing with my chronic pain. So I'm glad I read it for that reason, but for the most part, I wouldn't say that this is really necessary. I would suggest, if you are a parent that is also dealing with like trying to calm down your temper and stuff like that, that you could get the ebook and just kind of summarize through it. You wouldn't have to read the whole 200 pages. You could easily just read kind of like the topics, like she has it separated out in 9 chapters. Reading the beginning part of each chapter, you probably would get just as much from it. Sorry, I feel bad saying that, but I don't think it needed to be 200 pages long. And that is all the books I want to talk to you about today. I hope you guys are enjoying your holiday weekend if you are in the United States, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.